Okay, so in my follow target tutorial, we have this on late update, right? So let's actually try putting this on OnPreCull. If you remember from one of my other tutorials, on OnPreCull. So let's try OnPreCull. It's ideally supposed to be called before a camera culls the scene. But now let's see what actually happens. Does this actually work? No, it doesn't. Why is that? I wonder. Well, here's why. This project, OnPreCull is only meant for the base pipeline, or the standard built-in pipeline. But a lot of games are going to be using like the universal render pipeline, like this one is. So how do we do that? Now, I had to research this, and it took me a little while to find this. But here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you. So let's create another script called Camera Manager. This is really the only efficient way that I know of to do it. I'm going to show you how I do it. So void awake. And I'm going to show you void pre-render, void post. So here's what we have to do. Render pipeline manager. So it's not recognized. So use the unit engine rendering. So we need to use this namespace to have this. Dot begin camera rendering plus equals pre-render. Now there's a mistake here. So look, we need a scriptable render context and a camera. Well, that's easy. Let's just put those parameters in. Let's do the same thing for post-render. Then, so begin camera rendering. This is basically the pre-render. Okay? But it's very important. Don't forget to we're going to need to get rid of it. So, dot begin camera rendering minus equals pre-render. But now we're only doing the pre-render. So this is actually going to be, this essentially acts like the pre-cull, right? Now, however, this is going to do it for every single camera. Not just the cameras, not just stuff like that. Right? It's going to be for all cameras. We'll get to that in a moment. Let's implement post-render. So render pipeline manager dot end camera rendering plus equals post-render. Okay? Let's do the same thing here. Dot end. Let's get rid of post-render. All right, that's very important. So this is actually going to apply to all cameras, including the scene camera, which is actually kind of handy. But if you have some functions here that you only want certain things to run, we got to do something about that. Here's how we're going to do it. First of all, public. I'm going to just rename this to something else. That's not going to be called automatically. So public. We're going to need to call this from camera manager. Okay, so now pre-render. So what we want to do is check the components, or check what each camera has. We're going to see if this given camera actually has the follow target component. So if camera.tryGetComponent out follow target. So that's a Boolean, and we're actually going to assign this. So if camera tryGetComponent, if this is successful, this variable follow target is going to be equal to the camera get component. Essentially, it's going to be equal to that camera's follow target component. So now what we want to say is follow target.pre-render, just like that. All right. So the idea is this pre-render here is for all cameras including the scene view. So we have to check if it actually has the specific component. Each camera, we have to check each camera and see if it has the specific component. And then if it does, we're gonna call it pre-render. And you could do the same process for post-render. All right, just gonna copy this and paste it. I'm not actually doing anything in post-render. I just wanted to put it out there. So, hope you get that fairly well. Now, there's another thing that we want to know that is pretty useful. If we want to render the camera manually, it's a little bit, so let's actually put in a, I'm just going to get that namespace in there. I'm going to need the scriptable render context. All right, I'm going to need that. So now we are going to get an error here because we don't have the parameters. All right, pre-render is now expecting this context in the camera. So I've put these in. We are going to need these for rendering the camera. So we have them here. We actually have the stuff here. So just pass those in. Now, how do we render the camera manually? You might be thinking, oh, camera.render. And it might work, but I don't know. It doesn't work super well. That's the built-in pipeline. That's mainly the built-in pipeline. That can be problematic, actually. So here's what we want to do. So we need another namespace, first of all. Now, this is actually Universal Render Pipeline specific, not HDRP. I'm not going to go over HDRP because I don't use that. I don't recommend it. It's given me nothing but trouble. This one works better. So, anyways, using .rendering.universal, we're going to need that. All right? And here's what we're going to do. Universal Render Pipeline, render single camera. Now, you see, this needs a scriptable render context and a camera. So that's why I put these parameters in. Just pass those in. And hopefully that should actually work. Now, this might be problematic with the main camera, though. I don't know about rendering the main camera manually. But let's see how this actually plays out. Oh yeah, and make sure this camera manager is actually in your scene somewhere. I'm actually just going to call this game manager. Camera manager, you need that script. Alright, so now we should be able to... Yeah, here we go. And this camera, the scene camera... So the scene camera, like I said before, is using this pre-render. This pre-render is getting called for this main camera. But because the scene camera doesn't actually have the follow target component, well, or because only the main camera has the follow target component, that is what's this pre-render is only getting called for this camera. This is basically the pre-cull. This is basically how we do the pre-cull. It's just a little bit more of a process. So, yeah, I'm going to try to recap that really quick. So, pre-cull doesn't get called. Pre-cull, pre-render, post-render, none of those get called on the Universal Render Pipeline. Right? So we have to do, so we're going to do the render pipeline manager. Okay, so we use Unity Engine rendering, right? Then we go render pipeline manager, begin, camera, just take a look at this. Don't have to understand it that well, but this is how the pre-cull kind of works. So on begin camera rendering, we're going to do pre-render. Then after basically the post-render, we're going to do this post-render. Now this is like pre-render and post-render, but for all cameras, including the scene camera. So that's why we have to check the component. And then to render the camera manually, you have to do this method, taking in the context in the camera. And again, the best way to do that is to have the pre-render take in. And by the way, that doesn't work. Alright, I've tried this before. Attempting to do that does not work. You need to have it. I don't know how the context actually works, but I do know that it is a required parameter for these renderings. and also that it is used for this render single camera function. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much it. And yeah, I hope you found that little tutorial to be useful. That's basically how to work with the pre-cull. Well, I don't know if it's pre-cull, but OnPreRender at least. At least this is pre-render. There's not really that much of a difference, I don't think. But the idea is this is how you do pre-cull, pre-render, post-render. This is how you do it. So yeah, I hope you found that to be useful, and I'll see you guys later.